Volcus is a world of Stygian darkness and fiery illumination, a place of sprawling cityplexes and nightmarish industrial waste. Despite its horrors, this flawed jewel finds itself at the epicenter of a titanic struggle for dominance within the Cassandra system. Hello there. In this video, we're going to show you how to paint Killzone Volcus terrain so that it looks awesome on the battlefield in no time at all. The paints we'll be using are on the screen now. You can find the list of paints in the description below as well. We also have a list of the additional equipment we've used, but you can use whatever brushes you feel most comfortable with. If you're new to painting or want to brush up on your skills, you can check out the Citadel Color Painting Essentials playlist to learn all about our paints and techniques. As you can see, we've undercoated our Killzone Volcus terrain with grey cere. Let's get painting. First up, we're going to pick out all of the pipes, power units, wiring, vents, and other mechanical details with a well-named Mechanicus Standard Grey. Try to be as neat as you can here with these details. If you make any mistakes, you can always just tidy back up with grey cere. Just remember to thin out your paint with a little bit of water as well to make sure it's not too thick and goopy when applying it to the model. Alright, with all our pipes, vents, and general mechanical details picked out, we're on our way with this piece of terrain. Next up, we'll be using Retributor armor to pick out all of the gold trim that we can see on the reference pictures. How much of this that you want to pick out is up to you. In this video, we're going to do the horizontal trim as well as the door and window frames. Again, be as neat as possible here and tidy back up with the previous colors if needed. Now that the golden trim has been picked out, our Volcus terrain is really coming to life. We're going to pick out some of the smaller details next. Okay, we're now going to paint the Mechanicus symbol that we can find on our ruin. For this, we'll be using Abaddon Black. As you can see in the box art, half of the skull is black and then the reverse side of the outer edge is black. Once we're happy with that, we'll fill in the right-hand side. When that is done, we'll paint the left-hand side of the skull. With that completed, we now need to paint the reverse side of both the skull and outer edge with Corax White. You'll need a couple of layers here to get good coverage, so just remember to add a bit of water in order to thin out your paint so that you don't get any unwanted texturing. And with the Corax White done, our Mechanicus symbol has been picked out and we're really starting to crack on with this piece. On to the silver details next. Alright, we'll now pick out all of the working metals with Iron Warriors. So we're looking to paint the window bars, door wheels, and any little bits here and there that you think should be filled in. You can always check the box out for reference here as well. Our working metals are now fully based and it's time to move on to painting the floor. We're going to move on to the floor next. For this, we'll be using Pterodon Turquoise straight from the pot. I'm using a medium shade brush here because I want to load up with my contrast paint in order to apply it over the larger area heavily. As you can see, I'm applying it with large dollops. I'm doing this to avoid any unwanted tide marks. Once I've covered the entire area, I'll then go back and soak up any excess pooling. Okay, for the door, I'm using Sons of Horus Green. These two green tones for the floors and doors really help to punch some color onto our scenery. As always, try to be as neat as you can when painting the door and tidy up any mistakes with the previous colors. Alright, with the floor and door picked out, all of our base coats are done. We're now going to add some depth and weathering to really make our terrain awesome with not much extra work. Time for the shading phase. Our first shade will be an all-over wash of non-oil thinned with a 1:1 ratio with Lahmium Medium. The reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want the non-oil to be too powerful over our grey cere base coat. Also, when painting larger areas like the entire side of the scenery, the medium will help to reduce tide marks over the flatter surfaces. Just remember to be controlled with your application and paint the scenery in sections like what I have done. This means when you're finished with one particular section, you can go back in with a dry brush to soak up any pooling. Once the entire scenery piece has been painted, let it dry completely before carrying on. This should take about 20 minutes. And there we go, our non-oil has completely dried and really added a lot of depth to our terrain. Because we've done an all-over shade, it's tied all the details together nicely. Now that the shading is completely dry, we're going to add some highlights to our piece. We're going for an all-over highlight here, so we'll be using grey cere and dry brushing it over the entire area. When doing an all-over highlight like this, you want to make sure that you have light pressure on your brush because you don't want to get too much paint onto the model. We're looking to gently buff out the raised details and make them pop a little. If you want to know more about dry brushing, we have a Painting Essentials video all about it. Once that is done, As a little extra, you can then go in and add a bit of color to the center mass of some of the flat areas of the gray wall. In order to do this, I've made myself a little sponge tool. I've torn off excess sponge from one of my carry cases and put it in the plastic brush protector that I get on my Citadel brushes. Then I've torn off more excess sponge until it's in the shape that I want. I'll then dip the sponge into the paint on my palette and remove any excess by dabbing it on the palette until I just about see it coming off. Finally, I'll dab it onto the center mass of the flat area. As you can see, it'll add a little bit of texture. Awesome, that dry brush highlight has really made the terrain pop out nicely, and because we were gentle with it, we haven't overpowered any of our previous colors or shading that we've done. Remember to be gentle with the application and build up the highlight slowly. Okay, with the model highlighted, we now need to do the final steps. This will be to add some of that awesome weathering that we can see on the box art. So, we're going to use Mortarian grime to paint streaks of collected dirt and grime coming from the top of the wall and going into natural recesses. You can do as much or as little as you want to with this step. The beauty of it being on terrain is that you can have a lot of fun with it. Once you've done with the streaks from the top, then paint the bottom of the terrain as well. This will represent all the mud and dirt splashing up the walls. We're going to add a bit more depth to our grime streaks and mud by adding rattling grime into the center of them to show where it's still wet. Remember that grime, mud and most things fluid are darkest when wet still. Again, you can do as much or as little as you want with this. So just try out for yourself and have fun with the application. Alright, those two steps have really added a lot of weathering and character to our terrain. You can also use these steps to cover any mistakes that you might have made earlier. It's particularly useful to tone down any details that have been highlighted a bit too much as well. We're now going to paint the light that we can see above the door. For this, we're using Nazdrake Yellow because I think the warm yellow tone that it has will suit our weathered ruin well. If you overspill a little bit here, don't worry, because it will look like it's glowing. Finally, we need to use Abaddon Black to darken the top of the destroyed walls in order to show where the blast damage has been. We'll be dry brushing Abaddon Black over this area, so gently build up the application as you don't want to overpower all of the work you've done previously. It's always easier to add more than it is to take away when dry brushing. And there we go, with that final dry brush done, our Vulkos terrain is complete and looks awesome. Those final weathering steps have really helped to set the mood of a dark and grim battlefield. In this video, we've shown you how to paint Kill Team Vulkos terrain and get it to a great standard for games of Kill Team. We've had a lot of fun with this video, and we hope it has given you the inspiration to get your own Kill Team Vulkos terrain painted. For more painting videos, head over to our YouTube channel. If you need more help, you can always head to one of our Warhammer stores where our friendly staff will be more than happy to help. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye!